Alternative agenda now to the grassroots and seeing if we can make a change in Washington in 2 years.
Say a word about your engineering.
They just started made you pay taxes by the total account. So a lot of countries, a lot of places are realizing, oh my God, let's honor the urban, let's honor the feminine, let's honor everything that's sacred. Why do we want to keep if that's our impulse, how about a 12-month calendar, which was a calendar of patriarchy, a calendar of colonialism, and it's not a calendar of
I'm Sandy Ross. I was very involved with the revival of homeopathy about 3 decades ago, and then I got more involved.
There's some places that just have that continuously. That's some of the nice things about that area because it's not overlooked.
Somebody suggested that we should do this
Run that up with sticks and turbans and down from the generate the power you have to take it from the grid. The more it's demonstrated, the more people realize that we actually live in a give and take situation where we have to adapt our energies to the natural flows rather than just sort of live in this way and separate our nature.
I like the way the turbines
Mr. Schwab.
I was in Las Vegas about a week ago and I was woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and it was like this beautiful infusion or intense infusion of light, and I knew that I had to be a part of this. I'm a writer and international speaker and I do healing work of all different sorts, one of which is mass healings, and my hands were buzzing earlier and now they're really buzzing. I feel that the universe has brought me here this weekend to be somewhat of a conduit for developing and heightening awareness, consciousness, but hopefully bringing that divine love and light onto the planet. So I'm just grateful to be here, and whatever unfolds is whatever I can do for everybody here is great.
Well, like, I've been a student for a while, that was my main thing. I worked at a local coffee house for a little while, like coffee shop that had some organic coffee and some some free trade coffee and stuff, and that's the thing, right? Free trade is the better stuff. That's right. Free trade and fair trade, I get this flipped over. But free trade, right? Or fair trade, that's the fair trade stuff. But now one of the projects that I helped found is I'm starting to found this. It's kind of an academy in a sense, or more so like a learning center. And it's going to be about teaching the knowledge of so many kids in our generation, or my generation, so desperate to find right. What it is, there's so many kids in my generation who are like already awake and are waking up so quickly. They don't have an environment to grow, like increase contact and knowledge around their development. So that not only adapt to the new and but they'll be able to within the whole scope of the Banks Island project. The Banks Island project is sort of like a ground project.
Short presentations, after which we will open it up with the mic to other people who may want to make some comments as well. And you'll notice that there are video cameras now, and because we are hoping to be able to have a little program that could be sent to other places if we're not able to go to communicate with people about what this is about. First of all, I want to welcome all of you and thank you all for coming. It's really heartening to all of us who have been working on this to see you here and to be with you. My name is Sarah Nelson, and I'm the former director of the State of the World Forum as well as the Christic Institute, and spent 20 years in Washington working with the Institute, and before that with the National Organization for Women. And we did, starting with NOW and then taking it on into the Institute, we did the Karen Silkwood case, which resulted in stopping all orders of nuclear power plants in the country since 1979. And we did the first sanctuary defense case, which stopped the government from returning political refugees back to El Salvador and Guatemala, where they were being persecuted by death squads. And we also did the Iran-Contra case, which resulted in a huge investigation in Washington, D.C., and which exposed really hidden things that had been kept secret from the American people for 30 years. Because the people that we were suing in the Iran-Contra case were all working with Oliver North, and they had histories, 30-year histories of doing assassination programs, overthrowing governments, killing other democratically elected leaders, moving illegal guns to other parts of the world, violating the Constitution. I mean, it was really quite amazing, actually. And I believe that the work that we did not only exposed them and gave them a real run in the courts in terms of prosecuting them, but it also helped the American people begin to look at the television differently. So that when people, many people now, I'd say hundreds and thousands of people who were aware of what we were doing and what others were doing at that time, now realize that when they're watching the news, they may not be actually hearing the truth, or they're only hearing part of it, or it's distorted. And that's much more true now than it was 25, 30 years ago. And so there's that consciousness. But the thing is that for all of us that have been sort of warriors, we've been out in the front lines, dealing with injustice and problems that we feel are serious problems to our country and to other people in the world. We have spent our lives, really, years of our lives, reacting to the behavior of other people that we considered to be bad behavior and that was damaging to our people and to other people. And I can say that after 25 years of doing that kind of work, it really began to be clear to me that it was time to make a shift and to work on creating what it was we all knew was surely possible, which was a different way of doing things. Because actually, and this is one of the really interesting things about the new paradigm that we'll learn about this weekend, is that where we put our intention, that's where our energy goes. And in 1992, at the close of the Iran-Contra project that we were involved in, it was totally clear to me that the more that we put our energy into what this shadow government was doing, the more we were giving them our energy. And that the time, you know, the exposure had been done, and now it was time to talk about how to have something different than that. And how could we create something different than that? So when we left Washington, we were really in a frame of mind, and when we came to the West Coast, we were in a frame of mind of going through our own personal transformation, our own transition into another way of working, another way of living, and another way of thinking. Since tonight is, the sort of theme of tonight is to have a few people talk about going from adversaries of the old order to advocates of the new order, which is our theme tonight. I can say to you that when we came to Washington, or to California in '92, we were definitely in the frame of mind to make that transition. So now, this weekend that you all have come to join us in, I hope we will look back on this weekend and say that this was a historic gathering. That we came together to figure out how to launch an effort to take this thing that we've all been calling the new paradigm thought, and that people have been working on for the last 20-some years in their own ways, with their own meditations and their own classes, and going to India and doing a lot of different things to increase our own personal consciousness. That this was the weekend that we came together to really start figuring out how we can move this consciousness into the political arena ultimately, starting with 501c3 nonprofit work. Because all of the first elements of this work are nonprofit work. But ultimately, when a new paradigm agenda is finally assembled, it will be offered to all the candidates, all of them. And because until that happens, until there are actual people who are running for office, or until we inspire people to run for office, until there are people who are willing to carry a new agenda to the point of it actually becoming policy, we are caught all the time in the boxes of other people's paradigms. Whole paradigms of thought, whole world views, whole ways of understanding the world and deciding what to do about things, and which puts us into the situation we're in right now. And no one, people say, well, how can this be happening? We have the whole boomer generation, which has had more interest in spiritual development than anybody in the last 100 years. And we have all of this, and we now have a young generation that's just about as big as the boomer generation. Between the two of us, we can vote in anything. And what's happening? How can we be in such a fix that we are caught in an old paradigm of thought that just keeps making decisions that are different than the ones that we would make? Well, we've come to the conclusion, and I am very grateful to Dan Sheehan, my husband, for helping me understand this, because he really was the first one to help me begin to understand it. Until we have a clearly identified paradigm of thought, not a mushy one and not one that's scattered, but one that is clearly a paradigm of thought that is different than the conservative one, it's different than the reactionary one, it's different than the liberal one, and we have all these pieces in play right now, but ours is still kind of not quite pulled together. Not pulled together enough to produce policies and public programs and agendas that candidates could actually pick up and run with. Not together enough that we could actually organize a whole constituency of people in the country behind it, so that we weren't talking about personalities representing us, we were talking about people representing an agenda that represents us. And so this weekend is about coming together to talk about whether this is really possible, whether it's realistic, whether we think it can be done, and how we want to participate, and do we want to support this. So tonight is more personal, and several people here are going to share information with you. Carol Rosen, who, talk about a warrior. Yeah. All right, Carol. She has been just leading the fight for as long as I've known her, which is, what, 20 years now?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. For the demilitarization of space and for the shifting of the whole military paradigm into one of a constructive, positive program for humanity in terms of developing space in a way that will be positive for everyone. And John Mack, who has been a hero in terms of getting all kinds of positions to oppose the war back in the times of Vietnam, and leading people to understand that these kinds of decisions that are made to get involved in things like these wars are psychologically based decisions, and to be making decisions that are leading towards the total destruction of the human family is a psychological problem. And therefore, he's the founder and leader of this Center for Psychology and Social Change, and led the way in people understanding that there are serious psychological issues that are important in deciding whether we should have social change or not have social change. And Dan Sheehan is going to speak tonight, and he, many of you know, is one of the founders of the Christic Institute, was the general counsel and chief counsel on all the cases that I've mentioned, as well as many others before he became involved in the Christic Institute. His life is an unfolding story about the boomer generation. He has been in most places where we associate our sort of evolving history. He was at Wounded Knee, he was on the Pentagon Papers case, he was on one of the Watergate cases with the McCord case, and he put together the Karen Silkwood case, and he put together the Iran-Contra case, and it's kind of a long list of places where he was there, and he saw it, he saw the dynamics, and he has come to understand through 25 years of this that we have problems that are hidden from us, that there are things that go on that the establishment is responsible for that we don't know anything about, and he has come to the conclusion that it's time for us to stop reacting against those things and start building something completely new and something that is an alternative to that, so that there's a way for our people to galvanize around a positive vision and a positive agenda and a way through to another place than where we are right now. Because what happens is that people begin to feel hopeless. If they have consciousness themselves and their friends have consciousness, but it doesn't manifest in Washington, it doesn't manifest any place that they can see that's related to where they pay their tax money, it's like there's this disjuncture, there's this disjointedness between them as a person and the collective society that they live in and the leadership of that society. So in terms of what we're going to practically do, tomorrow we'll get together from 9 to 5, and there'll be a series of presentations with our participation at different times during the day. And I think in addition to those of us who are going to be sharing some information with you tonight, Foster Gamble will be there, and you're going to love this. I mean, he's going to make a visual presentation on quantum physics, because quantum physics is the science which underlies the new paradigm of thought. And he's working right now, that's why he's not here tonight, he's working right now on this visual presentation so that he can make it as clear as possible. And Mark Cummings is going to be talking tomorrow about, who is a physicist, is going to be talking about the technology, the potential for technology that flows out of this paradigm, that flows out of the science and this paradigm. And of course, you can't have much money to support the development of new technology if you don't have government investing government resources in getting it developed, right? I mean, we all remember this from when Jimmy Carter was in office. He actually, when he was in office, we had money going behind solar and wind and alternatives to fossil fuels, and then as soon as Ronald Reagan came in, all of that was lost. And if that hadn't happened, right now today, we would be in a different energy situation than we are currently in. So, but the new technology that flows from this paradigm of thought and of science is thrilling, absolutely thrilling. Gives you great hope that there are physical possibilities here that could shift huge aspects of our lives towards the better. And Carol will be talking tomorrow. Danny will be giving the overview of the project and what it is we really need to do together in order to make this real. And Carol will be talking about how we move from a military mindset into this more positive one that relates to shifting all that energy towards the development of space. So, and then on Sunday, I'm sure most of you know this, I've tried to email things to some people that haven't gotten emails, but on Sunday, we're in alliance. We're making natural and strategic alliances with a lot of different groups that are obvious groups for us to do this with. And one of them is YES, the Youth for Environmental Sanity. And they're calling people together on Sunday. And there will be youth leaders, really important youth leaders from around the country who will be making presentations. One of them is the one that organized the truce between the two gangs in Watts, the Bloods and the Crips that were killing one another. And this young person actually engineered the truce between them. But there are others who will be speaking, and also Dennis Kucinich will be speaking, and he is, in our opinion, a new paradigm candidate. And he will also be having a campaign event at the end of the day. So all of that goes on Sunday. So it's a full weekend. And tomorrow night, yes, tomorrow night Dennis is speaking in Marin. So a lot of us will go from our meeting at 5 to a dinner where we've made some reservations at a restaurant, not for a complete thing like this, but for everybody just go in there. And then we'll go to the 8 o'clock speech by Kucinich in Marin. And because we just kind of want to follow him while he's in the Bay Area to see what it is he has to say. The Paradigm Project, I want to be very clear, is not one that is connected to any candidate. It is a non-profit 501c3 project. And this agenda ultimately will be hopefully of assistance to any candidate at the local, state, and federal level. And as I said earlier, we want to organize people around that rather than around personalities. But he is a logical person who might be interested in this kind of program. So we're watching him very carefully. So the last thing that I would like to say is that at this table there are just the collective experience and heart intention and a vision and history of hard work and caring for humanity is astounding. And this is true all over the country. There are tables like this of people all over the country. And the question really is, can we, for our part, because everyone has to do their part now. I mean, we all know that now. It couldn't be any more obvious. The part that we want to contribute is the articulation. We know that cooperation rather than competition is now very, very important. We know that nurturing of life rather than exploitation of life is very important. We know that we're all connected, that there's integral life systems, that we're not isolated and we're not disconnected, that we're all interconnected. At some level that we can't, the morphic field that Sheldrick is talking about, we know that this is happening. We know that if we put our intention on something, things happen. We know that if we pray, things happen. Or if we meditate, things happen. We know a lot of things personally that are really part of the science of quantum physics. So the question is then, how does this become a full system of thought that expresses itself in policies that can really change how we live and what we put our money on and what we produce and how we relate to other countries in the world? And that's what it is we want to do, and that we're inviting all of you to participate in whatever way you can to make it happen. So I just want to turn the mic over right now to John. John, could you introduce yourself and share some information about going from an adversary to an advocate?
Can you close those?
It may just be.
Okay.
Is that mic for the video?
I was thinking, on the plane coming out here, that a group such as, well, first of all, events are moving so rapidly that they seem to trump any ideas that one has that I make up editorials and then the next day they're obsolete. So I was thinking about what are the things that endure? What are after the conflagration is hopefully over, and we look around at what we've done, what are some understandings, what are some ideas that we can bring out that will endure, that have to do with our self-understanding? And I noticed that one of the difficulties that we face, and I think this is not true of Danny and Sarah and some few people, but that the people who get into power, like the group that's running things now, are, I think there's a quote from Yeats about this, but they're full of confidence. They seem to be certain. They don't have doubt. Whatever they are up to, they're certain is right, no matter how devastatingly wrong it may be. Whereas those of us that are presumably operating from a higher paradigm or higher consciousness tend to be filled with doubt and uncertainty. And I'm not saying that to sort of entreat you into not having doubt. I mean, like, be certain. And I'm presenting it as a dilemma. So if you were to be thoughtful about these matters, then we were talking here about sort of outrage as an intelligent kind of way of being. But cohesive outrage on the part of coalescing groups like this has not been something that we've seen a great deal of in this country. I think that the people that are of this transformational mode tend not to engage the political process the way Danny Sheehan has, and Sarah, and very few other people. So I want to say something about the collective mind and then say a little bit about the center. The way I see the current, I don't know what to call them, the claque that is in power now, cabal, is that they are a symptom of a certain kind of mind. It's the mind, I call it the mind of dualism. It's the mind that says, that divides the world simply into good and evil. It's the mind, I think in psychoanalysis it would be called the primitive mind. It's not self-reflective. It tends to be arrogant. It's focused on its own power. It's self-righteous. And that's not unfamiliar as a mind. And it tends to resonate with fear in others, and it can keep power by always projecting darkness onto the other. It never sees itself. It denies what it doesn't want to see. Now, what's probably happening here, and I don't cheer for this, but it seems almost inevitable, as if this is going to be such a catastrophe that that mind is going to be brought into question. And then that's the time when the way we are trying to address the transcendence of that dualistic mind will have an opportunity to be heard and be expressed. So I think that we have to be ready. I mean, this current, Danny mentioned this to me on the phone the other day, but this current regime is operating in terms of think tanks just like this that got together with William Crystal and some of the other right-wingers to put together a plan, and they're enacting their plan. They're getting their way. They're having their day. So we will have our day if we're not afraid to come together. I want to say a word about the center, and maybe very briefly Dennis and Mary can say something as well about some of the other projects, because this is a project within the context of the center. The center began in 1982. Bob Lifton and Robert J. Lifton and I looked at the nuclear weapons situation, and we said, the doctors' movement is missing something. And we would go around on these bomb runs, you know, giving speeches about what a 1 megaton bomb would do in your city, and Helen Caldicott would get up and hold up a baby, and everybody would be, you know, it was tremendous for mobilizing public opinion. You knew a lot about what was going on about that. And, but what was missing was, what was this about? What kind of what was the human mind that could really threaten to annihilate virtually all life on the planet over a difference of point of view with another country? What was that about? Nobody was looking at that. So we started the center to examine that, and we began to do I did interviews of nuclear weapons, bomb makers. I mentioned that Carol had interviewed Jimmy Carter and the Assistant Secretary of Defense, the former member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We studied the effect of the weapons, the arms competition on children. We worked to develop curriculum in the schools that would look at U.S.-Soviet relationships, and the center began in the context of the nuclear arms race. Then when foundations tend to be rather fickle, and after Gorbachev made his speech in the United Nations in February of 1987, when he said that nuclear weapons were of no military value whatsoever, that sort of deflated the whole situation, and he said, you can go on with, you know, making more and more weapons, but we're not going to play. Now the Republicans think that was because we outspent them, but I think it's just because they happen to have a guy that had a little more intelligence than most of the leaders at the time. So our funding went away, and everybody thought, oh well, that's the end of the nuclear threat. So, but we did begin to look in the center more beyond the nuclear threat. Something more about the collective psychology of group violence, of aggression against not only one another, but against the Earth itself in terms of the destruction of the Earth's living systems and the ecological problems. And, then in 1990, I personally began to, I won't go into this in any detail, but I began to meet people who were having these UFO encounters. And I started to study that. And I didn't have the foggiest idea what this had to do with the center. Lawrence Rockefeller understood what it had to do with the center, but I didn't. And so we got a grant to do that work, lost most of the board because they didn't see what that had to do with what we were supposed to do as a center for, then it was called the Center for Psychological Studies in the Nuclear Age. And so we lost the board, and I didn't know what the relationship was between studying ET encounters and collective madness and transformation of the collective mind. I now understand it, and I think a lot of the people in this room understand it. Danny understood it. He understood it better than I did, actually, when he came to visit me. That was the new area of, there's getting rid of weapons in space, but there's also being aware of our connectedness in space to other intelligences. That's part of this. So what I now understand is that there are many ways that the Western mind can get blown. many ways that the paradigm of separateness can be shattered, that the paradigm of blaming, the paradigm of dualism can be transcended, the ways that the mind can be opened up. But the two fastest ways, well, three, are near-death experience, having a near-death experience, and you can't make that happen, that's not a good idea. UFO encounters, and you can sort of make that happen, and high-dose LSD trips. And you can't, you know, Stan Grof once said you should put, you know, aerosol all, you know, the LSD all over it and put it in the water and all that. You can't do that. So one of the, but so they're what's called non-ordinary states of consciousness, of which the UFO encounter phenomenon is one. And many of the people that are engaged in this kind of radical transformational work have had UFO encounters. They won't usually admit it, which is okay. But still, that's been the way that their, sometimes their awareness that we're one, not only with one another, but at a cosmic level. So the political connectedness, the political transformation, and the transformation that comes about through the awakening of our awareness that we're connected with other beings, other intelligence in the universe, it does relate. In other words, I now see that direction for the center made sense, although we lost, as I say, 2/3 of the board, but we got wonderful new board members like Dennis and Mary, who's now the director. So maybe you could say a word about how this fits into the other projects of the center.
I've got another microphone over there.
Oh, okay.
This one's.
Well, I guess I'll just begin that when I got involved with the center, I saw the beginnings, an opening for the kind of transformation that was needed by mankind. And basically, it's been clear to me, even as a small child, that something needed to be done. That even when I was a little kid, it was pretty obvious that there was a growing population explosion, there were pollution problems, there was a nuclear issue, but it seemed that nobody was talking about dealing with this stuff. And here was this group in Cambridge, and some of them were getting shaken up by having these extraordinary experiences. And some of them were focusing on the nuclear issues. And some were focusing on spirituality. And it was really clear to me that this was the beginning of a transformative group that may be able to answer this question that mankind needed a solution for.
I was in Las Vegas about a week ago, and I was woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was like this beautiful infusion or intense infusion of light. And I knew that I had to be a part of this. I'm a writer and international speaker, and I do healing work of all different sorts, one of which is mass healings. And my hands were buzzing earlier, and now they're really buzzing.
Yeah, say a word about your engineering. A large gearbox built in. When I found out what John was
God is truly the Trinity, God, Spirit, and life. It really is the basics of love that we're talking about. It is also not only the reservoir of radiant, we're actually already that's what's really the way we're just getting to the point where we recognize that and build certain types of demographic technologies that actually get that level of feeling and they're harmonized with that level of feeling why they can also harmonize the body, they can feel healing and all kinds of things.